Okay, so while we're getting ready for some of these new trials, gives us a chance to look back and update some of the trials that we followed here on Law and Crime. One of those, I should say two of those, because there were actually two trials, is Mississippi versus Quinton Tellis. This is the case of Jessica Chambers, burned alive in a car in this rural area in Mississippi. Quinton Tellis, the defendant, was accused of the crime. Took a while for him to be arrested. Not years, like some of the cases we've been following, but when they finally brought him in, started questioning him, and the prosecution decided he's the guy. He had a relationship with Jessica Chambers prior to her murder, and on the day of, he was one of the last people to be seen with her. Here's the wrinkle in this case, and this is what has led to not one but two hung juries. No fewer than 9 first responders on the scene as Jessica was dying, heard her say, in response to the question, "Who did this to you?" Eric did this. Eric set me on fire. Eric. 9 responders heard that. One thought maybe it was Derek, but nonetheless, 9 Erics and a Derek don't equal Quinton Tellis. And no matter what the prosecution did in Trial 1 versus Trial 2, they could not convince the jury that that was some sort of misspoken word, or that it's impossible that she could have even spoken because there was so much fire damage to her body. In the second trial, the prosecution brought on a speech therapist, a voice articulation specialist, to say there's no way, based on her injuries, Jessica Chambers could have uttered those words. Well, the jury didn't buy it. Let's jump into that case right now, and I have some updates for you to let you know where we're going. Is there a third trial in the offing? Where's the defendant these days? But first, let's jump into Quinton Tellis. This is the testimony from the mother of the victim.
Would you tell the jury about Jessica growing up?
She was just a bubbly child. She liked to play softball. She liked to cheer. Just a loving child.
Did she attend a local school here?
Yes, she did.
And was she a cheerleader?
Yes, she was.
Did she graduate from South Panola High School?
Yes, she did.
Can you tell the jury what her age was at the time of her death?
19.
Ms. Chambers, I'm going to hold a photograph up for you. Can you tell me who is depicted in this photograph?
It's Jessica Lane Chambers.
And is this what your daughter looked like when she passed away, before she passed away on December 6, 2014?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would ask that this photograph be offered and received in your eyes.
Objection, counsel?
No objection.
Being no objection, be marked and admitted.
Ms. Chambers, I'm going to move you to December the 6th of 2014. I'm assuming that is the day you will never forget.
Right.
Where did Jessica live on December the 6th, 2014?
With me.
And during the morning hours, did you see Jessica Chambers on this day?
Before dinner time? No.
Okay. And when did she return to your house during that time, during that day?
I'd say approximately 12:30, 1 o'clock.
And when she returned to your home, on this particular night, did you tell investigators something struck you odd about this phone call?
It was very quiet. It was like no music, no noises in the background. It was just quiet. Maybe the windows down, possibly nothing. You couldn't. It was like just silence. Just her.
What did that mean to you?
To me, it would mean, the way knowing Jessica, it would be like somebody was with her. You know, I couldn't tell you yes or no, but that would be how I took her call.
That is Lisa Chambers. That's Jessica Chambers' mom. That's in the retrial. So she had to live the original events, relive them in a first trial, relive them again in this retrial. Let's go back into the courtroom for more of the mom's testimony.
Now, before you woke up at 10 o'clock, you had no idea where she had been. Is that correct?
Well, she was in her bed when I went to bed. Now, I don't know where she was that morning.
Okay.
Claimed she went to work, but now I don't know.
Okay. So, at least before you woke up, you just don't know where she went? No, ma'am?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I believe the next time you heard from her was what time?
It's about 6:48.
Is there, you ask it this way, is there a reason you remember the exact time?
Because Mr. Held just told me the exact time,
Yeah.
but I do have it on my phone, so
You do?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. And pretty brief conversation that you had with
Yes,
her?
ma'am, pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty short?
Mm-hmm.
And over her cell phone, correct?
Correct.
How long would you say the phone call was?
I have no idea.
Okay. And I believe you testified that she said she was going to get something to eat. Did she say that in the phone call?
Yeah.
Okay. At 5:15 when she left, again, 5:15 or so, did she indicate to you where she was going then?
Same thing, going to get something to eat.
She was going to get something
Going
else
to clean
to eat?
out my car, and I'll be back in a little bit.
Oh. And then one last question for you. During that phone call that you had with Miss Jessica, you couldn't tell if there was anyone else in the car with her?
Did I hear anyone?
Right. Did
No.
you hear anyone? Okay.
No.
And so basically you don't know if anyone was in the car with her or not?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I tendered the witness, Your Honor.
That is Darla Palmer with just a couple of follow-up questions there on the defense for the mother of the victim. That is Lisa Chambers, Jessica Chambers' mom, talking about the last time they spoke. Gene Rossi still with me. Gene, this is you, a crafty prosecution type, you know, laying the foundation for the sympathy, for the heartbreak this family has gone through, right? I mean, that's the goal here, isn't it, to learn about this victim?
Well, yes. In a direct exam of the, I'm hearing an echo. That's okay. In direct exam by the prosecution, he did a very good job. And he made a melodramatic moment using the photo, which I would have done the same thing, so I can't criticize him. And the cross-examination focused on one thing. The mother did not know or hear anybody in the background. This is what she sensed. So I thought her testimony was important. You always want the mother or father or relative of the victim, but I don't think it was a home run. It was just something you had to do.
Yeah, and I think we're talking now about the retrial. So it is, you know, this is not theater. You know, you can't create the illusion of the first time like it's a Shakespearean play. These are not actors. Yeah. So every time they have to get up and tell their story, you're going to lose a little of that emotional edge. You know, if you're the prosecutor, obviously the mom lost the daughter. She's distraught. She can hardly speak. She's crying at times. Well, you do that enough times, I'm sorry, even mom's going to get a little desensitized to that.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. I always said a retrial is like putting on a wet bathing suit. and
make a note of that.
It's so true because I had so many I had a lot of retrials, I'm sorry. And when I prepared for the retrials, that great witness that I had in the first trial, that witness that just had a plethora of good quotes and comments, especially the relative of a victim, in the retrial, they're sort of a little bit burned out and they don't have that level of energy and enthusiasm that they did in the first trial. You're very correct on that.
Yeah, and we'll see that here in just a couple of moments, Gene, because some of the first responders, those who I mentioned, used the word Eric or Derek. In the first trial, one guy's life has been ruined, and it came across in his testimony. In the second trial, a little watered down. Let's hear from the first responders when we come back from this break right here on the Law and Crime Network. To the Law and Crime Network. I'm Michael Bryant. We're in the midst of Mississippi versus Quinton Tellis, and you might be thinking, oh, it's the third trial. No, we're looking back on the retrial, the second trial, and just kind of giving you a sense of what that was all about, and we'll talk a little bit more about the prospects going forward for Quinton Tellis, the defendant, and along for justice of some sort. The first responders were critical in this case. I'll put you on the jury. You've just heard a little bit about the case. You've heard from the mom. And you see the guy over there on the defense table. His name is Quinton Tellis. And you want to hear from first responders now because you figure if they've got something to say, maybe it's going to point the finger to Quinton Tellis. here's the key first responder, in my opinion, Cole Haley. And the first time he testified, he didn't quite make it out of the jury boxes, I mean, the witness box, it seemed. Gene, do you remember his testimony the first time around versus the second time around?
His testimony in the first trial was incredibly powerful. His career basically ended on that night.
Yeah, I mean, it was his marriage ended, his career ended. He was basically going through PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, as a result of what he saw that night. So if anything makes a witness credible, I think it's their own suffering as a result of what they experienced. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I remember he got very emotional, and you could just feel what he was experiencing when he saw her and heard her say Eric.
Yeah. Do we have that ready, guys? We have him. Let's watch it. This is from the retrial. This is Cole Haley in the Jessica Chambers case.
Now, when Daniel arrived, did he come take over Jessica for you?
He came and assisted me. He didn't necessarily. I let him. I still sat there and held her hand. That's all I could do. So, sweetheart, it's going to be okay. And she kept telling me, you know, I'm going to die. And I said, no, you're not. It's going to be okay. Help's coming. Help's coming. And Daniel got there and he knelt down with me on the other side of her. I was on one side. He was on the other side. And previous to Daniel arriving, I'd asked her name, and I'd gotten Jessica Chambers.
Could you clearly understand what she was saying?
Not clearly. I could just understand Jessica. I could make Jessica out. That's kind of, you know, the syllables and everything. You can make Jessica out.
Based on what I saw and believed her condition to be, I didn't think that we'd ever speak to her again after she left that scene. So I was trying to obtain as much information as I could for the law enforcement.
Did you attempt to obtain an answer to the phrase, "Who did this to you"?
I did.
Was she attempting to respond to you?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, make out what you thought was a name?
I did.
And what was the name you thought you heard?
Eric.
Now, just so this jury's clear, I want you to tell them exactly how you heard the name Eric come from Jessica Chambers.
It was maybe a one-syllable word. She was, as we were talking to her, like I've stated, it was extremely breathy. It was full of air. And it was like, Eric. But I got Eric out of what I heard. And that's why I put that in my quote. I put that in a quote in my report. But she had difficulty, and it wasn't like it wasn't just like, Eric, Jessica, who did this to you, Eric? That was not the case.
There's been a speech pathologist testify here to this jury today. If she were to testify that Jessica could not make out any articulate speech, what would your answer to that be?
I would agree.
So yet another first responder, Daniel Cole there. His testimony seemed to change a bit from trial 1 to trial 2. He was far less certain in trial 2 about having heard the word Eric, and he created this Herrick kind of version of it, and in fact said that's why he put it in quotes on his report. Didn't seem to go over that well, it seems to me. The jury apparently didn't buy it. Gene Rossi is with me. Gene, do you remember the distinction between his testimony? It almost seemed like the prosecutor might have suggested, hey, be less certain.
Yeah, because the prosecution in the second trial, and I still don't understand this, called an expert that said she could not speak. You have 9 people that say she spoke. 8 say it was Eric or sounded like it. And why the prosecution is confronting his own witness with his own expert, that makes absolutely no sense. But that variation that you just brought up, Michael, from the first trial to the second trial for Daniel Cole, That's that nuance that the cross-examiner should take advantage of, because his testimony seems to be tailored to corroborate the expert that they didn't call in the first trial.
You know, I'm just thinking of this now. They might have had some evidentiary issues, but it would have been great to play the video of his first testimony and then say, what's the deal? How did that change? Isn't it more likely sooner, nearer the time of the incident, you had a better recollection than you do as you sit here now a full year later? But that didn't happen. Bottom line is the jury didn't go for that. And the speech pathologist you mentioned, the speech expert, and we'll talk a lot about an expert and the importance of that expert in this second trial, she's going to take the stand when we come right back to the Law and Crime Network. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Michael Bryant. We are in the midst of going through the Mississippi versus Quinton Tellis retrial and kind of contrasting what happened in the first trial versus the second, and talking about where we are now, where are we going at this point since both trials ended in a hung jury. Critical to both cases, the first responders identifying Jessica having told them, Eric did this to me. Clearly the prosecution realized that was an issue after not using a speech pathologist in the first trial. They said, we're going to fix that part of the case. We had a hung jury because the jury just couldn't figure out why these guys would say they heard Eric when they didn't. We'll get a speech pathologist who will explain it to us. Let's go back into the courtroom. Dr. Carolyn Higdon is the expert that's going to tell us all about it.
My expert opinion, based on everything that I reviewed and my professional experience, is that given the severity of what I saw, it would be impossible for this person to make individual sounds in any way. From what I viewed, in my expert opinion, the severity of what I saw would have prohibited this person from producing any kind of an articulate sound.
For what time period?
From very soon after the trauma, like within minutes after the trauma.
Within minutes after the trauma. Okay. So that would be based upon what?
The severity of the burns and the pictures I saw of the vocal folds and the Dr. Hickerson's report of what was apparent when she did arrive at the med, as well as relating back to what went on during transportation to the med. Again, I've been at this a long time. Sure. There's no way this person produced an articulate sound from very soon after this inflammation started or this burn started.
Can you tell this jury as you sit here today when that inflammation that you just referred to would have started?
This person would not have sustained severe burns for more than a couple of minutes without losing their ability to communicate.
Okay. And that would be based upon what?
Everything I viewed, okay, and my expert opinion and my experience with trauma cases.
Oh, Dr. Higdon. Gene Rossi, I'm throwing the red flag here. I don't have a red flag, but if I did, I would throw it. If I have an expert that uses the word impossible, I'm not paying them. You can't bring an expert into a trial and be unequivocal that way. Even if the hypothetical you're told strains credibility, you can say that. But can you say impossible, Gene?
Either impossible or no way, Michael. That word and that phrase are devastating to an expert. And God, I'm just jumping out of my chair wanting to do a cross-examination of her. My question would be, the first question, Michael, would be, how many of the 9 officers who heard her speak did you interview? That would have been my first question, and the answer is a goose egg. Goose egg.
And then you could then say, what about this person? What about that person? What about Daniel Cole? What about Cole? You could reinforce 9 or 10 times the people that said Eric that couldn't possibly have heard it because she couldn't possibly say it.
Well, Michael, it goes there. Would it change your opinion if you read a report where Gene Rossi said he heard Eric? Would it change your opinion when you heard Cole hear Eric? It would be a treasure trove.
Well, I think the jury kind of did that for the defense. The defense may not have handled it exactly the same way, but the jury clearly was asking those questions. It's not just one person. It's 9 or 10 people saying something that was impossible, according to this expert. Okay, we're going to take a look now at some testimony from who am I taking a look at the testimony from? Well, that's right. We're going to go into some of the investigation now. From an ATF agent, this guy, Scott Meadows, is going to talk about what I'm calling, Gene, I'm calling this the modern-day DNA. This is cell phone records testimony. Let's listen to this.
That evening. And basically, his phone and her phone were in the same places at the same times.
That's accurate, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned that he had said that he had tried to throw some or give her some money early in the day. When y'all went through the CCTV at the store, and they've been to the store, were you able to see any evidence of him coming across the street and giving her money?
I never saw that on December 6th. No, I did not.
And you looked at the entire day, is that correct?
I did.
Matter of fact, you looked at multiple days on that video, didn't you?
I did. We looked for days before and after, yes, sir.
Okay. Was a meeting called concerning this new information regarding Quinton?
Yes, sir.
And what was decided at that meeting that we needed to do?
Well, we met, looked at what we had, and it's like, we need to further investigate this. And at that point, utilizing databases, Paul learned that Quinton was in Monroe, Louisiana, and we developed an interview strategy and then went to Monroe to interview him.
Okay. Just look through both those documents and tell me if you recognize them.
I do, sir.
What are they?
It's a Miranda warning, waiver of rights, signed by Quinton Tellis. The first page was signed on November the 2nd, 2015. And the second page is a different form, the same Miranda warning, Miranda rights, dated November the 3rd, 2015.
Your Honor, I would offer this as an exhibit testimony. This is a collective two-page exhibit.
None, Your Honor. You marked it and
So this is critical information for the prosecution. They're trying to put Quinton Tellis in the wrong place at the wrong time, or should it be the wrong place at the right time? Gene, tell me your thoughts on cell phone positioning data and that new age technology that is being used so often now to put defendants in the wrong place.
Well, I got to compliment the prosecutor because I've been really hard on him. You always want to put in the Miranda form that's signed when you interview a defendant. The jury likes that. It's professional. But on cell phones, they can be so devastating. When I had trials or when I supervised trials, placing the defendant or defendants near the commission of a crime by cell towers is incredibly helpful to the government. And also text messages right before the murder or near the murder is devastating.
What do you think about the actual technology of plotting out where somebody is or might be as a result of cell tower pings? I mean, each carrier has their own towers. I mean, it seems to me that it is far less precise than it's presented to a jury.
Well, you want an approximation. If you have a cell phone of a defendant that is within, say 5 miles of the location of an event, a murder, and it's in a rural area, that's pretty good evidence. But if it's in a congested urban area, then the location of a cell phone tower and a ping to it, there could be 80,000 people that's like the defendant near that cell tower. It doesn't mean as much.
Yeah, I really see a proliferation of experts and counter-experts who are going to talk about how precise it is on one front, and then no, it's not very precise. It could be within, a half a mile, which in some cases is relevant and important. In other cases, maybe it doesn't matter. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with more of the Jessica Chambers case against Quinton Tellis. This is the retrial. We'll be back in a moment. Network, everybody. We're in Mississippi for Quinton Tellis. This is the retrial. And, we've heard a little bit from the first responders. We've heard from a speech pathologist. Now we're going to hear from the defendant himself. Quinton Tellis was interviewed, of course, over a long period of time by the police. And luckily, it's videotaped interrogation. So let's go into the courtroom for Quinton Tellis and his interrogation video.
She used to spend night with me at my mom's house. I don't even know when I started talking to another girl, but I can't remember what month I was talking to her. When she lived over there off she lived in the Shiloh. Her name is Kayana. Yeah, what's her last name? Shit Johnson. Kayana Johnson. She got a nickname? Kayana. Everybody called it Yana? Yana. Oh. She started hollering at her at some point. Wow, man, my old lady from down here, we went together. I was talking to her. Did your old lady from down here ever come up and visit? How did she come up? She came up there a few times. Oh, really? So where did she stay when she came up? With me? She stayed with my mom. The trail house there across from girls. Remember those burns on your arm? Those burns on the back? Mm-hmm. Remember that? Tell us about that again. Well, we was all in the sandbox, and we had been drinking, and we had a fire burning the wood pellets, and that was like, it was been that we couldn't jump over the fire. So I said I could jump over the fire, so I ran back to the barbecue grill, and I took off and jumped. I made it, but at the end, like, I just fell back in the fire, and they pulled me up. What night was that? Can't remember what night that was.
So you get a feel for Quinton Tellis there in that just very small part of a very long interrogation. So what's going on with Quinton Tellis these days? We know that there was a hung jury in this second retrial as well. Then he was shipped back to Louisiana, where he was given a 10-year sentence for using a credit card or an ATM card illegally from a woman who, by the way, was murdered just before he started using that card. He has not, despite numerous stories out and about, he has not been charged with murder in Louisiana. Today was the point at which he reached 35% of his 10-year sentence on that fraudulent use of an ATM card in Louisiana. And that, with good time, good behavior, gets him out. So there's what we're hearing is he's being moved today, maybe tomorrow, to Monroe County, where they're detaining him on a drug charge, not a murder charge, because there's an arrest warrant for him for the murder, but there has never been a charge filed against him. Once those charges are filed in Louisiana and the DA says eventually they're going to do it, they say that, then they have 3 years to bring him to trial. So his existence is almost as muddled as the Chambers family, who sits and wonders, is there going to be a third trial? What I'm hearing is it's highly unlikely, based on the fact that what else is she going to do? Gene Rossi, what else is she going to do the third time around to get past Eric?
And from what you tell me, the first two trials, the jury voted, I guess, 5-7 for guilt, 7-5 for guilt. That's not good. I will say that Mr. Tellis and his attorneys, what they're probably doing is getting him in jail, holding him, hoping more evidence could come out to help the Panola County, Mississippi prosecutors. And there's one piece of evidence that could come out. If Tellis gets on a recorded call at the jail, which doesn't have any protections for privacy and Sixth Amendment or Miranda, if he makes a statement on a recording that suggests he knows a lot more about the murder of Jessica, then that could be very important evidence for Mississippi.
You know, the murder in Louisiana was a violent stabbing. I think there were dozens of stab wounds, as I recall. Very violent. The belief in the Mississippi case that Quinton Tellis set the car on fire. Jessica burned as a result, was, I guess, spun out of control over denial to give him sex. If you look at each of those events, they're pretty violent, right? And so you've seen this play out twice now. Do you have a gut feeling about Quinton Tellis in either how he was presented himself in the interrogation, how he presented himself in court? Your gut, does it tell you this is a violent kind of guy that's going to do that, or you just say these days I've seen it all?
My gut is that for that murder, my gut, based on observing his body language, he didn't look like a guy who killed Jessica Chambers. And it goes back to the 9 elephants in the room. There were 9 people that heard either Eric, 8, and then the 9th heard Derek. It's very possible that there was another individual who could have taken her life. He did have sex with her that day, but it was somebody else who she had a relationship, either drug-related or he was jealous of their relationship. Who knows? But Quinton Tellis didn't look like he had committed the murder based on his body language.
And I will say that sources are saying that the attorney, the district attorney's office is telling Ben Chambers, yes, we're going forward. There will be a 3rd trial. Pretty vague to say that considering all that's going on or not going on in Louisiana. But we're hearing that. We're also hearing, and this is kind of an interesting note, you might recall Darla Palmer, the defense attorney who led the charge in both cases that led to a hung trial. Obviously, she was lauded as doing a tremendous job. Well, she is now running for DA in Jackson County. You know, she became a star as a result of these cases. So I'm not all that familiar with down south and the interconnectivity of the counties. What do you think about that, Gene?
Well, you know what? I'm Forrest Gump. I'm connected to everything, okay? My wife, Diane, is from Greenwood, Mississippi in LaFleur County, okay? And my sister-in-law and her husband live in Jackson, the capital. And her father, Diane's father, ran for governor, so I know Mississippi pretty well. And I got to tell you, she will make a terrific county prosecutor. She did a great job in Tellis 1 and 2.
Well, we'll see if there's a number 3. Gene Rossi, thank you very much. A pleasure to work with you. I've seen you so many times on the network. Great to actually get to interact with you and have some fun here today. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, folks, we're going to wrap it up for me for this afternoon. I'll see you again tomorrow. I think we might be in a live trial, which will be very exciting. Michael Bryant here. Stand by for more trial coverage right here on the Law and Crime Network. Have a good day.